or something. Could be far more than that. So I was asking, is this fair? And the argument that was being made in the Senate was, well, it's not fair that cash buyers don't have to pay this and people who are filing a mortgage do. Well, interestingly enough, the proposal that they came up with does not charge cash buyers for anything because cash buyers won't be filing a mortgage, so they're not paying anything either. But somehow, it was very interesting to me to have this discussion about, well, what is fair? And we're doing this because we want to be fair. So also in the Senate, we made some technical changes to the homestead refund program. The tax changes are saying that many people don't have to pay income tax on their business income, if it's on a Schedule E or Schedule C. So all of a sudden, those people were going to be able to qualify for the homestead refund because their income in Kansas was now next to nothing. So they said, well, that isn't what we meant. We didn't mean for people, we meant them not to pay any taxes, but we didn't mean them to get a homestead refund. That reminded those of us in the Democratic caucus on the Senate that we were very concerned that when that homestead refund program was developed, it did not include renters or excluded them. Previously, the homestead refund recognized that renters pay property tax through their rent. And so it had been a way for many people. I know Paul Jefferson said I could point him out. He's one of the people that...
For me, it's the
food sales tax. Oh, because you're not, yeah, there's some people who are paying rent, but they're now no longer able to qualify for that refund just because they rent. The same issue was raised with the proposal in the school finance that we give people who are sending their kids to a private school, we give them a tax deduction, but that tax deduction was only going to be available to people who paid property tax. It was not going to be available to renters. So yes, Paul, it was the food sales tax rebates that we also changed.
Yeah.
So we had recognized that low-income Kansans shouldn't be charged sales tax on food. And because we still have sales tax on food in the state, we had done that by making people qualify for rebates. But the decision was made that you only get a food sales tax rebate if you are paying income tax. So you can deduct it from what income tax you would pay. But if you are living on disability income or other things, then that is no longer available. And I'm saying, is this fair? There are some other issues with the income tax. Somehow the banks got left out. Bankers thought that they should be in on the reduction in taxes that others were in on. And the same was true for many farmers who have been used to being able to claim a loss against non-farm income. So certainly in Jefferson County, most of the people who are farming have another job. Somebody's teaching school, somebody's working for the fire department or the sheriff's office. So if that farm or ranch had a loss one year, they could take that deduction against the other income. It's no longer true because we exempted that income. Well, they were looking at this issue for agriculture and issue for the banks, and they said, well, we can take care of the banks because that's only $6 million, and we can afford that. So now is that fair?
No.
But again, we're looking at money. What can we afford? And we're making decisions about what is fair based on what we can afford. There is now in another tax bill an opportunity regarding the agricultural losses, but then you have to ask yourself, why are we letting people claim a loss if in a year when they make money, we're not going to be charging them any income tax? So again, one of the things when they were working to limit the tax liability, I don't think they were thinking about agricultural individuals or rental property owners who take a deduction through their tax. Representative Wilson explained a little bit about the school finance law and how that came about. In fact, in a conference committee, you should be only considering issues that have passed by one or the other house, either in the House or the Senate. And those amendments about the teacher's due process were made on the floor in the Senate. And one of the reasons that that bill was so narrowly focused is there's also a law that you can't have more than one subject in a bill. And so as long as it was education, you could do the education budget along with changes, other changes, policy changes to school education. And it was, I think, the intent to be able to include some of those policy changes, which is why the bill went forward the way it did. But when we talked about eliminating the due process for teachers, we did that for teachers K through 12, but not for teachers in our community colleges or technical colleges. And so I asked on the floor, okay, why are we taking this away from one group and not another? And the answer was that we really wanted very good teachers through K through 12. So I'm not convinced that this change in due process results necessarily in better teachers. This is not tenure. This is very different from tenure. Each year, any school board can non-renew a contract for a teacher after 3 years. Before 3 years, there's no questions asked. After 3 years, they simply have to make a statement of the reason and let the teacher know that there's an opportunity for an administrative hearing. So I guess along with repealing the RPS, the Senate sent forward a bill about net metering. And that's a question about, are we being fair? Is it fair to make your changes in payments and opportunities for these solar customer generators and wind generators based on a hunch? Because there's really no information that we have yet. We haven't asked for the study from the KCC, although we're asking for that information now, about what is the cost and what are the benefits of having customer generators put energy on our network. Particularly, and this is why I had solar down here, particularly for the solar customer generators, they are generating during peak hours of usage. And so that's much more valuable energy because it's going to be more expensive for the utilities to produce that or to buy it elsewhere during that time. Certainly, if we're talking about things that aren't fair, healthcare coverage and Medicaid coverage is the biggest thing this year that I think the legislature has just not been willing to deal with, especially when we've created a gap in that coverage. And it's interesting that Kansas would get more than most other states because we have had such low opportunities for people to participate. If you're an adult without children, there is no way that you can qualify for Medicaid. But for those people now who may be young, just starting off, not making it in their job, they may earn too much to qualify for the subsidy and too much to get Medicaid and not enough to qualify for the subsidy. So we've created that gap, and certainly I think everybody believes that's not fair. So I think we also should note that our tax plan means we're paying more in federal taxes, right? Because if you're not paying state income taxes, you're not deducting that from your overall income. So we're sending whatever would be people's federal deduction on to the federal government, and yet we're sort of saying, oh, but we wouldn't want to take money back from the federal government in most cases. And we're saying we don't want to have the federal government tell us what to do. I think that's certainly what we've spent a lot of time doing. But then again, and I think Representative Wilson mentioned this, we want to tell local government what they should do, and we want to tell them how they should deal with guns, because really, that's the state's prerogative. So again, something that's not necessarily fair. Lastly, we spent a lot of time on environmental issues. We talked about snakes and should the legislature be the ones that are deciding what species should be on our list. We talked about the prairie chicken. We clearly are talking about filing a suit with the federal government when the federal government's order has said, we appreciate the plan that the 5 states have put together. We believe that if you're following this, that makes sense, and then we're going to sue them for doing what we asked them to do. But another real concern was the discussion about limiting the duration of conservation easements. Yes. So, and to not allow easements in perpetuity. And this, I think, there's some argument that some easements should be for the life of the property. And I think watersheds have had a very good argument when they say the federal 404 regulations are requiring people to set aside mitigation in a conservation easement in perpetuity to build a dam when they're destroying other riparian habitat. And you can see that it might make sense to limit those easements for the duration of the project. That as long as the dam is there until we've restored that other habitat, that would be a reasonable limit. But we do not put limits when a company is drilling an oil or a gas well. We don't say you can only have this well for 50 years. We do not when we're handing out water rights in Kansas. We've said those are in perpetuity and you can sell them. Once you have them, we're acting as if you have them forever. And simply because we're in the ECM, I would like to note that I think the creator of the tall grass prairie may have indeed hoped that we would keep it in perpetuity. So, Doug, come out and let's ask her. I know he's going to have to be going in about 10 minutes, but...
Marcy, are we operating under a manifest destiny myth that we can actually think we can restore wetlands or natural habitats? That is, for example, the South Lawrence Traffic Way and the Baker Wetlands mitigation process seems to be operating under the idea that the built environment can always trump the natural environment, and then we can flip it back again once we're done with that protocol.
I think we are operating in that hope, but certainly what I see for the requirements for the lesser prairie chicken and for these 404 regulations are setting aside existing habitat. So those have not been man-made habitat as what was proposed for the Southwest Traffic Way. Austin.
Two things having to do with education. First, did the changes that have been made actually do what was intended to better equalize the spread of the state money over the various districts. And secondly, sounds like a fine point. Would local boards still be able, by contract, to provide due process? Because as a board member myself, I have seen it, and I am convinced that the lack of due process will cause certain people to be, good people, to be uninterested in risking the employment.
But the first one is, the courts ruled about adequacy and equity, and only asked the legislature to address equity by the July 1st deadline. So I think we have put together a finance plan that restores the 100% of the match for the local option budget and for the capital outlay. Now, the problem was none of that money was going to go to the schools.
Yeah.
Okay? Because the way the school finance works, you collect the 20 mills of property tax, the treasurer looks to see how much has been collected, and the state fills in. And the state was saying, well, we will only fill in up to 79 or 80% of the local option budget, because that's what we can afford to do. The schools went ahead and spent the money because up to their limits, and they had been collecting their percentage of the local option budget. So the money that we're generating goes back essentially to the ratepayers to fill in for what the schools were already allowed to be paying. I think the Johnson County schools in particular wanted to raise the LOB, and that was probably the way to get their votes in the House, if they got any of them, so that they said you can raise the LOB to from 31 to 33%. You can do it this year without a vote. So we're technically meeting that rule. We've made some changes, though, that will cost the school districts money. So essentially, I don't think that the courts were thinking that we would meet that rule and give the schools less. So now that argument feeds into this adequacy. If it wasn't adequate before, it's surely not adequate now. And again, it's doing the thing that we've been complaining about, which is we're not collecting enough income at the state level to pay our bills, so we're going to put it on local property taxpayers.
Yep. And no, I think that's terrific, and I would just say that there was one plan that was put out there. This is simplifying it too much, but one plan that was just, we have the money, let's write a check, essentially, and address the court's ruling. The challenge is with where the governor's tax plan is taking us, it's all about having an ending balance right now. And if you looked at the governor's budget that he put out this year, it only is like a two or 3 year budget profile, maybe 2 year budget profile. Normally we see a 5-year budget profile showing out years. If you look at the out years right now, it is horrible. Basically, by 2019, for us to get to $0, meaning we've burned through our savings account, for us to get to $0, between now and then, we're going to have to cut like almost $1 billion, so $800 million, to get to $0. When by statute, we're supposed to have a 7.5% ending balance, so $300 or $400 million. So they need to save that ending balance. So the school funding that we saw now is really this kind of mishmash of let's change how we calculate things, let's allow people to raise their LOB so we can generate from local property taxes, and let's maybe put a little bit of new money in there. But by and large, there's not like an infusion of new money into schools right now. It's just kind of accounting. So it's not pretty.
Will you speak to his other question about the policy on can a school board institute due process? They're not they're not disallowed from that.
I think that they would be able to do that, but I did see a press release from the Kansas Association of School Boards that says, we've got to look into all of these issues, and that was one of the ones that they had identified, that they wanted to make sure that schools could do that. Now, the thing that they wouldn't have by themselves as a school board is access to the administrative hearing. So they would have to set up their own administrative hearing board.
But they could do that.
What?
But they could do that.
They could do that, but it's certainly makes, it's efficient to be able to use a state board that's
Sure.
already set up
Yeah.
and is already reviewing other cases. So while in Lawrence that makes sense, there may be some districts that go together and try to set that up. If you were a very small school district, that may be a much higher hurdle to cross.
Yes. Again,
But the thing is, it really isn't tenure, is it?
You really what?
The concept of tenure really doesn't apply. It's about having a process of being heard.
yeah.
It's not about tenure. Tenure, you're guaranteed a job, aren't you?
Yes. No, this is not tenure.
tenure.
It's,
And I don't know how it
Has
got
been.
stated that way. I think it's very confusing to people.
Well, it's framing. I mean, it's framing by political opponents. Here's the thing. I think if you peel back the layers, not even a whole lot. If you look at the most powerful political action committees in the state, those that have the most money, the teachers' union is the best funded. They fund about 80% Democrats and 20% Republicans. The Kansas Chamber of Commerce funds 100% Republicans. So I think this is just part of a series of things to try to get back its political retribution for people who are standing in the way of those that think they deserve all the power. That's what I think it is.
Yeah.
so in addition to the hearing, the school board has to state a reason. And I think, and that's really just the fact that they know they have to do that. You know, we all behave better if we have to write something down on paper about what it is we're doing.
And I think that the teachers negotiating team for USD 497 has already listed that as their top negotiable item for this upcoming contract negotiations that they're going through, restoring the due process for 497.
Well,
And I don't think-
and civil options are still available to teachers. They can still sue in a civil process.
They can sue. They will not have a stated reason, so it will be a little more difficult.
Messy.
More time consuming, more messy, and
More
the
expensive.
the argument that I was making on the Senate floor was, this is not getting our education dollars to the classroom. This is taking education dollars and sending them to the courts.
Yeah.
That's not where they belong.